learners, hello and welcome to today's session on Erik Erikson's theory of psychosocial development. I'm delighted to have you with us as we explore one of the most influential and enduring theories in developmental psychology, a theory that helps us understand how identity, emotions, and relationships evolve across the entire human lifespan. Let us begin by taking a brief look at the life and work of the man behind this theory. Erik Erikson was born in 1902. He was a German-American psychoanalyst and developmental psychologist whose work reshaped how we understand personality and identity. Born in Frankfurt, Germany, Erikson initially trained as an artist before shifting to psychoanalysis. Under the mentorship of Anna Freud, the daughter of Sigmund Freud. Although influenced by Freudian thought, Erikson eventually took a divergent path, focusing less on instinctual drives and more on social, emotional, and cultural influences in development. Erikson's most celebrated contribution is his psychosocial theory of development, which he first introduced in his 1950 book, Childhood and Society. The theory offers a comprehensive framework for understanding human growth from infancy to old age. Unlike Freud, who emphasized the psychosexual stages that focus on early childhood, Erikson argued that personality evolves throughout the lifespan. He believed that development is not something that stops at adolescence. Rather, it is a continuous process of navigating new social roles, relationships, and life challenges. At the core of Erikson's theory are 8 distinct stages of psychosocial development, each defined by a specific conflict or crisis that must be resolved. These are not merely internal struggles. They arise from the interaction between an individual's psychological needs and the demands of their social environment. For example, in early infancy, the primary conflict is trust versus mistrust, while in adolescence, it becomes identity versus role confusion. Each stage builds upon the successful or sometimes unsuccessful resolutions of the previous one, forming a developmental chain across life. What makes this theory so compelling is its emphasis on the virtues or strengths that emerges from each successfully navigated stage, such as hope, will, purpose, fidelity, love, care, and finally, wisdom. These virtues not only reflect a healthy resolution of the psychosocial conflict, but also serve as psychological resources that help individuals cope with future life challenges. Conversely, failure to resolve these conflicts can lead to difficulties in forming a coherent sense of self, maintaining stable relationships, and adapting to changes. One of the defining features of Erikson's theory is its lifespan perspective. He asserted that human development is shaped by lifelong interactions with society and is not confined to childhood or adolescence. This extension of development into adulthood and old age was groundbreaking at the time and continues to influence how educators, counselors, and psychologists approach human growth today. Whether it is a young adult struggling to establish intimacy or an older adult reflecting on their life with a sense of integrity or despair, Erikson provided a roadmap to understand these experiences in psychological terms. It's important to note that Erikson did not work alone in his later years. His wife and collaborator, John Erikson, played a crucial role in refining the theory, especially its later stages. Together, they emphasized that all 8 stages are present from birth but emerges in a sequence that aligns with biological growth and cultural expectations. They also noted that these developmental conflicts are not necessarily resolved once and for all. Instead, they may re-emerge and be revisited throughout life, a reminder that personal growth is ongoing and flexible. What makes Erikson's theory so compelling is the idea that successful resolution of each stage leads to the development of a core psychological strength or virtue such as hope, will, purpose, fidelity, love, care, and eventually wisdom. These virtues not only mark healthy psychological growth, but also equip individuals to meet future challenges with resilience and meaning. On the other hand, when a stage is not successfully navigated, it can lead to difficulties in forming identity, building relationships, or adapting to change later in life. Another significant feature of Erikson theory is its attention to the social and cultural context in which development occurs. He believed that humans are not merely driven by internal urges, but by the need to connect, contribute, and find meaning within their communities. For Erikson, development is not only psychological, but psychosocial, driven by both the individual's needs and societal expectations. To put it simply, Erikson viewed life as a series of developmental challenges, each one requiring us to reflect, adapt, and grow. The goal is not perfection, but growth, and growth in Erikson's view is always possible. Even if a task is not fully resolved at the time it first emerges, it can be revisited and reworked later. This idea that development is both sequential and cyclical makes Erikson's theory both structured and flexible, a rare combination in developmental psychology. Today, Erikson's ideas continue to shape how we understand identity formation, emotional growth, and social development. His work is used in education, mental health, counseling, and gerontology. Among other fields, his theory is especially valued for its ability to explain not just how we grow, but why we sometimes struggle and how we can continue growing even in the face of adversity. Let us now turn our attention to Erikson's 8 stages of development one by one, beginning with the first stage, that is trust versus mistrust, which spans from birth to 18 months. At this stage, infants are entirely dependent on caregivers for food, comfort, warmth, and affection. When caregivers respond consistently and lovingly, infants develop trust, foundational sense that the world is safe and reliable. However, if caregivers are neglectful, inconsistent, or unresponsive, infants may develop mistrust, leading to fear and insecurity. The virtue that emerges from this stage is hope, the belief that even in the face of uncertainty, support will be available. The next stage is autonomy versus shame and doubt, taking place during early childhood between 18 months and 3 years of age. At this stage, children begin to assert their independence, making simple choices and trying to do things on their own, such as choosing food, toys, or clothes. They also start exploring their environment and gaining control over bodily functions. With encouragement and patience, children develop a belief in their own abilities. But when caregivers are overly critical, controlling, or dismissive, children may develop shame and doubt about their competence. The virtue that develops in this stage is will, the inner strength to make choices and act with growing independence. The third stage is initiative versus guilt, occurring during the preschool years, ages 3 to 5 years. At this stage, children begin to take initiatives, directing play, asking questions, and trying out new roles. They seek to plan and act on their ideas with increasing confidence. When caregivers and educators respond with encouragement and patience, children develop initiatives, sense of purpose, confidence, and leadership. They begin to see themselves as capable of making decisions and acting on them. However, if their efforts are met with punishment, criticism, or discouragement, children may develop guilt, which can lead to hesitation and fear of making mistakes. The virtue that emerges from this stage is purpose. That is, the ability to set goals, take initiative, and act with intention. Now, we come to the fourth stage, industry versus inferiority, which takes place during the early school years, from ages 5 to 12. At this stage, children faces new academic and social challenges. They begin to develop skills, take pride in achievements, and seek approval from people like teachers, parents, and peers. When encouraged and praised, they develop industry, a sense of confidence, and the desire to work hard. But if efforts are met with criticism or failure, children may feel inferior, doubting their abilities and losing motivation. The virtue gain is competence, the belief in one's skills, and the capacity to succeed. Now, the fifth stage, identity versus role confusion, takes place during adolescence, a time of significant physical, emotional, and social change. Teenagers begin asking themselves, who am I? And what do I want to become? In this process, they often experiment with different roles, beliefs, values, and social identities, testing how each one fits. When given space and supports to explore, they can develop a clear sense of identity. Supportive environment, referred to as psychosocial moratorium, allows them to experiment without pressure or immediate commitment. Without this space, adolescents may experience role confusion, struggling to define their place in society or make meaningful choices. This can lead to uncertainty and identity crisis. The virtue that emerges is fidelity, the ability to remain true to oneself and committed to personal values, even in the face of external pressure. Erikson emphasized that identity formulation is a gradual process, often extending into the 20s, particularly in today's complex and changing societies. The sixth stage, intimacy versus isolation, occurs during young adulthood from ages 18 to 35 years. At this stage, individuals seek to form close, committed relationships. Success leads to deep, meaningful bonds, while failure may result in loneliness, emotional distance, or isolation. Erikson emphasized that a strong sense of personal identity developed in the previous stage is essential for true intimacy. Without it, individuals may struggle to connect and may avoid commitment. Cultural factors also shape this experience. In some societies, relationships are formed early or arranged, with intimacy shaped more by tradition than individual choices. Erikson noted that building intimacy often require sacrificing of one's independence in order to build lasting connections. The virtue gained is love, the ability to form lasting, genuine emotional bonds with others. Now, we come to the stage 7, generativity versus stagnation, 40 to 65 years. In middle adulthood, the focus shifts to generativity, the desire to contribute to the next generations and leave a lasting impact. This can be expressed through parenting, mentoring, community involvement, or meaningful work. Success at this stage leads to feeling of usefulness, productivity, and accomplishment. However, if adults feel disconnected or fail to contribute meaningfully, they may experience stagnation, a sense of self-absorption, dissatisfaction, and lack of purpose. Generativity is about building a legacy, whether through raising children, supporting others, or improving society. The virtue gained is care, a deep commitment to nurturing others and making a positive difference in the world. Finally, we arrive at the last stage, ego integrity versus despair, 65 years and older. In late adulthood, individuals reflect on their life's journey, reviewing past experiences, past choices, achievements, and regrets. Those who feel they have lived meaningfully experience ego integrity, a sense of fulfillment, peace, and readiness for life's end. But those who see their life as unaccomplished may feel despair, often marked by regret, bitterness, or fear of death. Erikson's inclusion of old age made his theory unique. He emphasized that successful aging involves accepting one's life as it was, with both success and failure. The virtue gained at this stage is wisdom, deep understanding and acceptance of life's meaning. Now that we have explored Erik Erikson's psychosocial stages, let's turn to the educational implication of his theory. One of the key takeaways is that Erikson's theory helps teachers understand how emotional and social development shapes learning. When educators know what stages a student is in, they can better support both academic growth and personal development. Secondly, educators must recognize that every child is at different stage of psychosocial development. Teaching should not only follow a one-size-fits-all approach, but should address students' cognitive, emotional, and social needs. Another key takeaway is the importance of social interaction and emotional support. Schools must create environments that encourage collaboration, empathy, and open communication between students and teachers. In addition, curriculum design must be developmentally responsive. For example, in early grades, activity should promote independence, self-confidence, and exploratory learning. In adolescence, topics should address self-identity, ethical decision-making, and career planning. For adult learners, programs should include reflective practices, legacy work, and opportunities for contribution. Furthermore, educators must be equipped to identify and respond to developmental challenges. Students struggling with low self-esteem, identity confusion, or lack of motivation may be facing unresolved psychosocial issues. This should be met with empathy, counseling support, and appropriate interventions. However, despite its wide acceptance, Erikson's psychosocial theory has also faced several criticisms. One of the most common critiques is its rigid stage structure. Erikson proposed that individuals pass through 8 distinct stages in a fixed sequence. However, human development is often fluid. People may revisit earlier stages or experience them out of order depending on their life circumstances, making the model less flexible than real-world development. Another major criticism is the theory's cultural bias. Erikson's ideas are rooted in Western individualistic value, emphasizing personal identity, autonomy, and independence. In many non-Western cultures, development is shaped more by community, family roles, and collective identity, which are not fully captured in his model. The theory has also been challenged for overlooking important social factors. It doesn't adequately account for how gender, race, social class, or economic hardship might influence psychosocial development. As a result, its applicability across diverse populations is limited. Critics have also pointed to the oversimplification of complex developmental processes. By dividing development into just 8 stages, each with a single central conflict, Erikson may have underestimated the multiple overlapping challenges people may face throughout life. In addition, Erikson places strong emphasis on emotional and social development, but gives relatively little attention to cognitive growth. This leaves out important aspects of how thinking, reasoning, and problem-solving evolved across the lifespan. The theory has also been described as somewhat deterministic. It implies that unresolved issues in one stage may negatively affect all later stages. However, research shows that people often grow and heal later in life, even after earlier difficulties. Another limitation lies in the less detailed treatment of adult stages. While Erikson extended his theory into adulthood and old age, these later stages are not as fully developed or clearly defined as those in the childhood and adolescence. Finally, the theory can be difficult to apply in practice because it is broad and somewhat abstract. Educators and therapists may find it challenging to use without additional, more specific tools or frameworks. In conclusion, Erikson's psychosocial theory continues to be a meaningful and influential framework in understanding human development. It highlights the vital role of social relationships, identity, and life challenges in shaping who we become. For educators and practitioners, the theory offers practical insights into the emotional and developmental needs of individuals at every stage of life. By applying these ideas thoughtfully, we can better support learners not just academically, but as whole evolving individuals. Thank you for joining. I hope this session helped you understand the core ideas of Erikson's theory of psychosocial development and its importance in education and beyond.